on, yeah.
So I get the whole vulnerable thing in the personal life with family and friends. As a business owner and a woman, I'm having trouble transferring that over to that. So I'm wondering how you made that connection and made that leap, and if it was a struggle for you as well.
It's a great question.
Thank you, Erica.
So what was interesting about your question is after the TED Talk went viral, the majority of calls I got were from organizations, like big Fortune 500 companies saying, we saw your TED Talk, we really want you to come in and talk to our leaders, or, you know. And I said, okay, what do you want me to talk about? And they'd say, anything but shame and vulnerability. I said, well, that's what the TED Talk was on. They're like, no, we can't do that. We don't do that. Women leaders and women business owners were far more resistant than male. 100%. One of the most vivid experiences I have, memories I have of an experience that I had, was that I was getting ready to do the opening keynote for a large corporation who had a female CEO. I was standing right behind her. She had no idea who I was. And she said to the person putting on the event, let me get this straight. The opening keynote is a woman talking about weakness. How did that happen? Yeah. And I was like, oh. Awesome. Yeah. And the person talking to her obviously could see me, and she was like, yeah. And,
you're like,
right, yeah. And the woman turned around and I was like, hi, I'm Brene. And, you know, what do you say? You know, and so I was like, you know what, are you going to be here for the keynote? And she goes, I wasn't planning on it. I said, it would be really, I think it'd be very helpful and essential for you to be here. Why am I talking to the people who work under you if this is your perception of my work and you're not even going to hear it?
Bam.
So yeah,
Take
so
that.
she said, I will definitely stay. She sat in the front row and cried through the whole entire thing. And she was just like, afterwards she came up and she said, I get like really weepy thinking about it as a woman too, and as a strong woman and as a business owner for myself too. She said, I thought I was successful because I wasn't vulnerable. And now what I'm realizing is that I was successful because I'm smart and I'm good at what I do. I am stuck here and with this company because I'm unwilling to be vulnerable. I cannot go any further. And so I think what the issue is around work is that, you know, everything that we want more of at work, trust, engagement, accountability, adaptability to change, innovation, creativity, every single one of those is born of vulnerability. And the problem is that we need to rethink and redefine what we mean when we say vulnerable. What does that mean? Does that mean like I was just reading an HBR, or it was either an HBR or with Harvard Business Review or Fast Company. I was on a plane last week reading something that had something about vulnerability is okay at work. And it had a picture of a guy in a suit with a big teardrop coming down his cheek. Like, what I mean by vulnerability is I mean to show up, you know, the definition of vulnerability, let's just use that from the data, is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. How can you be a good leader who's not willing to walk into uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure? What is the difference, I think, between what I would call an armored leader and a vulnerable present leader is the ability to say, yeah, this is scary. We don't know how this is going to turn out. But I have confidence in us, and I think we can take it on. And if we fail,
we will fail by daring greatly.
We'll fail by daring greatly. And then we'll clean that shit up, and we'll learn from it, and we'll embed the learning into our culture. Where I was coming back reading from that article as I was coming back from Facebook. So I did a talk.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's a really sweet little organization. Yay, big! But it was almost like being John Malkovich when I was there, because they had converted the bottom of this corridor of this hotel to like what their headquarters looks like. And the whole theme was dare. And so at their headquarters, they have these posters, all these dare quotes. You know, fortune favors the bold, be brave, screw up. you know, everywhere. And so it was like someone was in my brain. But what I realized is that here's the problem, I think, with vulnerability at work. In you, vulnerability is courage. In me, it's weakness. It's the first thing I look for in you as someone who works for me, and the last thing I want to show you as a leader. But show me and here's the other thing, the myth that I really want to deconstruct. And I have never had the chance. I like the long format.
The long format. I'm just like, I'm on for the ride, right? This is amazing.
I mean, it's just good. I love it. Is what I hear people say is, yes, you can be vulnerable at work, but not too vulnerable. That's like saying you can be healthy, but not too healthy. Like, you can't really be too healthy. When people say too vulnerable, what they mean is there's boundary issues. But there's a very simple equation, which is vulnerability minus boundaries is not vulnerability at all. There's no such thing. It's like, so
I get it. Yeah.
And so when those questions become the center of conversation in our communities, in our homes, in our schools, in our offices, how many of you have ever worked in an office where the central question is, what should I be afraid of today and whose fault is it? I mean, if you've ever worked, you should have your hand up. It's indicative of scarcity. So let's talk about what scarcity culture is and what it looks like. Scarcity culture, I think, is best understood with a simple question of never enough. And you can fill in the blanks. Never good enough, safe enough, certain enough, perfect enough, relevant enough, and perhaps I think one of the most dangerous and insidious messages today is never extraordinary enough. Somehow, in the world we live in today, an ordinary life has become synonymous with a meaningless life. And it has huge, and I've watched it happen not only as a researcher, I'm a qualitative researcher, so I sit across from people and look in their eyes and I have a good sense of what's going on in their lives. But as a university professor who's been teaching for the last 17 years, it's been very clear to me that extraordinary means relevant. You know, a couple of years ago, this is a terrible example, but the truth, a couple of years ago, it was huge controversy in the US because Rutgers University paid the highest honorarium it had ever paid in the history of the university to Snooki, the reality TV star of the Jersey Shore. This filters into our DNA and becomes messaging for us. And so scarcity is about never, and the top one is the big one for all of us personally, never good enough. Which is shame, which we all have on occasion, that sense that we're not smart enough, good enough, perfect enough, loved enough, promoted enough. We're not enough. So what we do in response to scarcity culture, I think all of us every day, is this. We wake up in the morning and we armor up. And we put it on and we say, I'm going to go out in the world. I'm basically just going to kick some ass. I'm not going to let anyone see who I am. And in doing so, I can protect myself against the things that hurt the most. Judgment, criticism, fear, blame, ridicule. I'm going to armor up and I'm going to be safe. And we rationalize and we convince ourselves that this armor is really smart. And we use a lot of different things to armor too. Perfectionism, intellectualizing. Truly, I have to be honest with you, before the TED Talk, which accidentally went viral, and was a total experiment, I thought, let me be vulnerable while I'm talking about vulnerability. It's a small group. How bad could it be if a few hundred people think I'm nuts? But before that talk, do you know what the name of my lecture that I gave all the time, all over? The name. Variables Mitigating Self-Conscious Affect. It never went viral. But that was my university-issued armor. If all else fails, use words that are really big, that you're quasi-sure what they mean. So we use a lot of different things to armor, right? But if you get really, really clear about what we're doing every morning when we wake up and decide to armor, it's this simple. This is what we're protecting. We're protecting being hurt for a very simple reason that no one really wants to talk about, which is this: love, belonging, irreducible needs of men, women, and children. In the absence of love and belonging, there is always suffering. And so what we believe is that we can protect our sense of being lovable and being acceptable and being worth connection with armor. The news that above all other I did not want to hear is simply this. And I don't even want to